I've got to say, I really like this concept of taking a superhero and making him a bad guy. Hey movie watchers, welcome to today's review of Brightburn, starring Elizabeth Banks, David Denman, Jackson Dunn, and was directed by David Yarovesky. If you're new to this channel, I'm going to talk about my likes, my dislikes, and then give you the breakdown. All my reviews have spoilers, so consider this to be fair warning. Okay movie watchers, let's review. So the movie starts off with just enough background story to kind of get you going. Tori and Kyle are trying to make a baby, and you see all these books of infertility, so clearly they're struggling having children. Then they experience a sudden impact in the woods by their house, which ultimately turns out to be a little baby boy from like outer space or something. They take him home, name him Brandon, and pretend that he's theirs. Then you get like a montage of him kind of growing up, and they seem to be a very normal and loving family. Brandon appears normal until around his 10th birthday. Then he starts experiencing these callings and these like hypnotic episodes, like some sort of possession. And he's being spoken to in a different language that we don't recognize or understand. And he's always being drawn towards the spaceship that brought him here, quote unquote spaceship that brought him here, that his stepfather locked in the shed. He quickly realizes that he has superhuman abilities like strength and speed and flight. And during one of these hypnotic episodes, he appears to learn of his true purpose according to the voices that he's kind of hearing in his head. They tell him to simply take the world, take over the world, subdue the world, however you want to hear it or see it. They ultimately tell him to take the world. Then you kind of start to see him get angry very easy. He's very short-tempered, and he tends not to tolerate people that stop him from getting what he wants or doing what he wants to do. He just kills them, actually, most of the time. Usually in some kind of horrific way. His father takes him to the woods on a hunting trip to try to stop him by shooting him in the back of the head. Clearly that didn't work, and then he kills Kyle in a very personal way. And Tori, his mother, who never wanted to believe that her son was capable of all these atrocities, then realizes that is in fact her son that is doing all of these bad things, hurting and killing all of these people. She actually also tries to stop Brandon and comes up with a pretty good plan, but she ultimately fails and she dies as well. And in the final scenes, we see that Brandon has basically fully answered his calling, fully answered the voices that he was hearing in his head the whole time, and he goes on a seriously destructive, merciless rampage that just probably kills a lot of people. And that's the end of the movie. Starting with my likes, like number one, I actually kind of rather enjoyed this semi-origin story rather than a full-blown origin story. I'm typically the kind of person who wants to see where the characters come from, how they got where they are, what they had to go through, what struggles they had to go through to get where they are. And I typically want to see all of that before we start to see who they become. But for this movie, I actually liked how they skipped over kind of most of that stuff, and they just started with him here on Earth. This way they could just get into it faster, where him becoming a problematic and dark child, and then gaining superpowers, and then ultimately becoming a killer, and just becoming like all different levels of destructive. Like number two, I liked how they progressed his darkness in the movie. It seemed as if the more he realized he couldn't be hurt himself and could easily hurt and kill others, the darker and the more dangerous and the more out of control he became. He seemed very interested in the human body in kind of like a strange, dark way. We see that progress from his pictures underneath his mattress, to cutting open Erica to see what was inside, to just sitting there watching his uncle take his last breaths when he died, to just straight up using his laser eyes to burn holes right through his father's head. His darkness just continued to progress, which to me seems like how an all-powerful, disastrous, destructive monstrous kind of person would really be like. Like number 3, I also liked how he was virtually indestructible, except for whatever reason the ship itself could injure him, but nothing else could. I like how they just made him incredibly powerful and twisted and fearless and ultimately just hungry for more destruction. If you're going to have a Superman kind of villain, then those powers might be the closest thing to an unstoppable supervillain that we could ever see or imagine. And I think they really showed that in this movie. Moving on to my dislikes, the only thing I didn't like about the movie is kind of petty, but you know what, it is what it is. I did not like how they didn't really explain how he was cut by the actual ship there towards the end of the movie. But I only didn't like it because it leaves some questions unanswered. Obviously, we suspect that he's from Krypton or something similar, but is the ship itself made of kryptonite? If so, then is kryptonite the only thing that can hurt him? You see, I thought that the closer he got to kryptonite, the less powerful he became. So there was kind of like a distance factor in place. But in this movie, it seems that kryptonite is actually the only thing specifically that can hurt him. It'll be very interesting to me to see if they continue with this concept in future movies or if they change it. If it stands as it is, it could be very hard to kill him or capture him, as the only piece of kryptonite on the planet right now is currently the ship he arrived in. So as far as a dislike is concerned, they created a weakness for him, but they didn't explain the weakness very well. So it just leaves me with a bunch of questions on how they're going to play it out, what they're going to do with it. And so I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but ultimately I am looking forward to them explaining it a little more in maybe the next movie or a sequel or whatever. Movie watcher question. What is your opinion on supervillain movies like these? Do you find them as interesting and as entertaining as I do, or do you still prefer the superhero versus villain, the good versus evil type of stories? Okay, movie watchers, here's the breakdown. I'm giving the writing a 7 out of 10, as I would have liked a little more of an explanation on him getting cut by the ship, what it was made out of, how do we get more of it? Is it the only thing that can hurt him? Is there a distance factor in his ability to get hurt? Things like that. The acting is getting a 7.5 out of 10. I really thought Elizabeth, David, and Jackson all played their respective roles pretty well. Nothing was exemplary or anything amazing, but it still was very believable, and I thought it was very genuine. The cinematography gets a 7.5 out of 10 because I think they did a pretty darn good job at combining the superhero movie style and the horror movie style genres of cinematography together for this movie. It's something I was very interested in seeing if they could pull it off, and I think they did. I think they did a really good job with it. I'm giving the directing an 8 out of 10. I think David did very good here, and I really don't have any complaints specifically towards him or towards the directorial decisions that he ultimately made with this movie. Overall, Brightburn's getting a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share for me. I've got more reviews and discussions coming your way, so check back soon for those, and I'll see you on the next one.